Hi, today we're going to be working on story summarizing. This is something that you can do with any one of your stories that you do, be it like a one-week story where you focus on it daily, or maybe a longer novel unit. I've done it with both. We're going to focus on Charlotte's Web and what my class did with that after each chapter. So let's look at my computer. I have a Google form set up here, and what I just have the kids do is focus on who in the chapter is the main character. What did that character want? What was the problem in that chapter? How did the character solve the problem? And what was the resolution to the problem? So we would do that for each chapter. And then what happened is on the other side of the form, it created a Google spreadsheet so that you could see each of the chapter summaries. So what you can do is you can have this printed out for the kids, and then they can use this later on. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this information and then breaking it down into the beginning of the book, the middle and the beginning part, the middle, the second part, and the end. So if you look at the narrative always has the purple colors. So we just take a simple lined piece of paper, fold it on over like this, and then open it up. I put my heading, my story title. These words right here are yellow because we're going to be using transitions there. I also have the kids make a little firecracker here for the firecracker moment. And then we talk about how the action rises from the middle to the middle two, and then how it's falling action in the end. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at these sections and say, what do you think is the beginning of the story? Where do we learn about who the story is about, where it takes place, what's happening? And so we'll kind of highlight those and say beginning along the side. Then what we're going to do is we're going to draw a quick sketch right here, and then we're going to write about what happens in the beginning. And they can just jot down words over here and then think about how would they start that section. Then we'll do the same thing with middle, and I talk to the kids about how middle one is usually where we figure out what's the problem in this story. So not just what's the problem in the chapter, but the story as a whole. And so then we'll figure out, well, which chapters is that established in? And so this story was a longer novel. It is about, I feel like, 22 chapters. So they have a lot of information to look through. And the biggest thing to get across to the kids is you're making a summary of the whole book. So we did each of the chapters. Now we need to narrow that down. After they finished creating this and making sure that they talk about their firecracker moment, where does that problem get resolved, then they'll talk about the end and kind of the falling action there. What we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to make this into a short narrative book. And so they'll put Charlotte's Web. And this is not from Step Up to Writing, this is just my own that I use. And then they do their quick sketch picture over here, and then they can formally write what happened in the beginning, what happens in the middle, draw their picture, making sure to include transitions right there. And we've already talked about transitions and those kinds of things with narrative at this point in the year. And then middle two, and then the end, and then at the end they can draw a picture of themselves and write their name. So for doing the Google form, we would do 2 chapters every day. So we would read the chapter, we would have our discussion, and then we would fill out the information as a whole class. Just to practice summarizing, they would talk to their neighbors about it. I would listen to their conversations. I would write down what I was hearing in the class. So that's how that would work. Then what's going to happen is we'll look over this information, we'll break it down into another class period. We would break it down into these different sections and prepare this. So then what would happen is this would be broken down into, okay, these chapters were the beginning of the book. These chapters were middle one. These chapters are middle two. And here's the end. So that would be one other class period. Then another class period, we would probably work on doing the beginning section, the middle section, the second middle, and then the end. And that would be a longer class period. And then we would probably spend about 2 days working on getting our information from notes and quick sketches to final product. This is a longer range project, but any of these pieces could be used separately. For example, you could use this just with a novel unit, and that could take 1 class period. You could do these kinds of notes, which I've done for just a 1 week story, so you could just do this piece of it. You can take it however far you want to take it and what works best with your class and your time frame. So as we talked about before, we're going to decide which chapter is a part of the beginning, where does the middle start. So I talked about that with the kids, and we decided that in the beginning, that's when you learn about all the different characters, and then the problem starts to arise in the middle, middle one. So those we labeled as middle one. And then we kept going, and middle one was a pretty big section, and then we decided that middle one was everything that happened on Zuckerman's farm, and then middle two is when they start to talk about the fair, and so we labeled all of those. And then the exploding moment right here is when all the action is kind of at the climax right there, and then the end is just the receding action. And so by doing that, then the students were able to come up with a quick sketch paper, and this is what that looked like. We had them put yellow right here because they needed to come up with a transition for each section. So in the beginning, we learn about, who is the story about, who are the main characters, where does it take place. And then in this middle one, we talk about everything that happens on Zuckerman's farm and the friendship that happens between Charlotte and Wilbur. And then over here, we talk about what happens at the fair and the award that Wilbur receives. And then at the end, we talk about Wilbur going back to Zuckerman's barn and about Charlotte's daughters that end up staying with Wilbur. So from this, then I had the students make their own story book up, and it was a summary practice. So you could do this with any story that you're doing. And then this is what they came up with for the beginning. So she took all of this information and then she created a summary along with a more detailed picture. And then middle one, middle two, and then the end, and then they also got to do a picture of themselves as the author. You could do this with any story. This took us, doing this paper was about one lesson. They needed a little bit extra time to complete it on their own. And then doing this booklet was probably about 2 lessons worth doing the writing. So they were able to accomplish this in one day, and then this part, these other 2 on the next day.